hail down here in Texas.
Oh yeah, what's up everybody? This is your boy Rob Clark, Big Bad Bob with you. This is episode 230 of the Lone Gunman Podcast, and got an action-packed, fun-filled episode for you today. Thank you once again, Roger and Shepherd on Fire, for the theme music. I love it. Make sure you're following along on Twitter at the Lone Gunman 7. On YouTube, the Lone Gunman Podcast channel, and on TikTok, search for at the Lone Gunman 7 or the Lone Gunman Podcast at gmail.com. The TikTok will have exclusive content you can't find anywhere else, folks. So make sure you are checking it out, following along, and TikToking your little asses off. All right, so let's get right into it. I got two things for you today. The first thing I want to talk about is something that's kind of been around for a little while when it comes to assassination lore and conspiracy and all that good stuff. And it's been debated over the years, and people go back and forth. What does it mean? So figured I would find some of the best work I could find on it. And that would be from Noel Twyman in his book, Bloody Treason. Now, what I'm talking about here is, so after the assassination, as they are searching the Texas School Book Depository and trying to find any evidence whatsoever that shots were fired from the building, we have Deputy Luke Mooney finding a paper bag and two shells, or three shells, or two shells and a live round in the southwest corner of the school book depository at an open window behind some books. Now, the Warren Commission said that there was 3 shots. That's it. And they configured their shot sequence about which shot did what. And then they had to pull an audible because a fellow by the name of James Tague came forward and said, "Hey, yo, dumbasses, I got hit in my face from a missed shot that picked a piece of the curb up and nicked me in the face." Okay, so that's how we went from 3 shots that did exactly this and exactly that to 3 shots where 1 missed, and 1 had to be the headshot, of course, and the other one had to be a little magical to explain all the other wounds in 2 men, 7 different wounds in 2 different men. Now, John Connolly always felt that he was hit by a different bullet than the same one that came through JFK. And he stated this as long as he lived. And he was not a proponent of the magic bullet theory. And as you might suspect, it's kind of hard to argue with the man. He was sitting in the car when all this happened. He is one that actually got shot when all this happened. Now, a lot of people in Dealey Plaza claim that the shot sequence went something like this: boom, boom, boom. Okay. With the first one sounding somewhat like a firecracker, like a cheap pop. So you have bam, bam, bam. Now, with those last two shots being so close together, it makes it almost impossible for them to be shot from the same rifle, at least a bolt action rifle, or any rifle that is not semi automatic. And what I mean by semi automatic is you pull the trigger, you don't have to do anything, and you pull the trigger again. With the bolt action, you sight it up, you pull the trigger, you have to work the bolt up, back, and forward again, and down in order to eject the spent shell casing and insert another live round into the chamber. This takes time to do. It can't be done instantaneously. It can be done quickly, yeah, but not so quickly that you're going to get a bang, bang. That's just too quick. Okay. That to me is indication of more than one shooter, more than one rifle, more than one shot. And, some of these Dealey Plaza witnesses, and I understand that ear and eyewitnesses can't be 100% reliable, especially given the acoustics of Dealey Plaza, given the reliability of eyewitnesses, and this, that, and the other. But there were quite a few ear witnesses who said that they heard 4 shots. The acoustical evidence from the HSCA and the Dictabelt recording indicated 4 shots. One from the region of the Grassy Knoll, as a matter of fact. So there's that. And then, when you're a fledgling, when you're a little youngling researcher into all this stuff, and you're looking through evidence documents, you're looking through evidence, photos of the evidence in the case, and you see certain things, and you're like, that's weird. Doesn't really match what they said. And one of those things that jumped out to me many years ago, and a lot of other people as well, is, a picture of the evidence collected on a table, with the rifle on the blanket and a couple other things, and only 2 spent shells. Now, we've always been told that there were 3 spent shells found under the window to account for the 3 shots from the rifle, right? And 1 live round was found in the chamber. And there is a little fuckery going on with these shells. There is some indication that at some point Fritz picked up the shells, put them in his pocket, and maybe put them back down on the floor at some point. Maybe not all of them. But there's many ways that lone nutters can account for this discrepancy in a myriad of different ways. But if there were only 2 spent shells found on the 6th floor and 1 live round on the floor, then the whole 3-shot scenario by Lee Harvey Oswald goes right out the window, folks. And what are we left with? At least a lot of, most, if not, well, most Dealey Plaza witnesses will acquiesce to hearing 3 shots. Like I said, sometimes people say they heard 4, but you rarely ever run into a witness that says, I only heard 1 shot, or I only heard 2 shots, or I heard 18 shots. It's either 3 or 4. 99% of the time. So we have ourselves a problem if there's only 2 shells, 2 spent shells found on the 6th floor under the window. So from Noel Twyman's book Bloody Treason on the 2-shell problem, we are going to follow along and see what we can make out here. The foregoing discussions have been based on statements in the Warren Commission report that 3 empty 6.5 millimeter cartridge shells were found on the 6th floor of the school book depository, and 1 live round was found in the chamber, like I said. Thus, no more than 3 shots would have been fired from Oswald's rifle. This was accepted by the Commission as a fundamental premise. But a new document found by Anna Marie in the National Archives throws severe doubt on the 3 empty cartridges premise. This document, Exhibit 10 to 12A, is in the form of a copy of an evidence envelope which contained photographs with the envelope signed by FBI agent J. Doyle Williams. The description of which states thusly: 2 negatives and 4 prints of each of the 2 6.5 bullet holes and 1 live round of 6.5 ammunition from the rifle found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository on 11/22/63. So there's our first indication of 2 6.5 millimeter bullet holes and 1 live round from J. Doyle Williams, FBI Special Agent. Now, the photographs in the envelope consisted of 8 prints, all showing 2 empty cartridges and 1 round of live ammunition. When I received this, it appeared to be the most important evidence indeed. How ironic, I thought, that after all these years of arguing and controversy over the magic bullet and the number of shots, to discover such conclusive evidence that there were only 2 empty cartridges. The entire case of the government was built on a house of cards. This FBI document and photograph were never, insofar as I have been able to determine, shown to the Warren Commission. They are another example of Hoover's FBI concealing evidence. But this evidence did not come as a complete surprise. Gary Shaw, in his book Cover Up, first published in 1976, revealed a document showing that only 2 spent 6.5 millimeter rounds had been recorded in the original evidence sheet, yet Warren Commission hang on. Hold on. Warren Commission Joseph Ball could have gotten himself involved in such a transparent scheme. After completing the above writing, yet another document would surface on June 27, 1994, that added credence to the conclusion of only 2 empty shells. This was in the book Searching the Shadows by Stephen Earhart. I obtained a copy of the document, and it shows the Dallas police found a 6.5 millimeter rifle, 2 spent holes on the 6th floor between 1:30 and 2:15 p.m. Note, 2 spent holes, not 3, as was used by the Warren Commission to make its case for a lone gunman. I thought surely no more evidence could ever be necessary to put away forever the Warren Commission's single bullet fabrication. Then a final nail in the coffin comes to light. Now, this evidence envelope states, 2 negatives, 4 prints of each of 2 6.5 inch or millimeter bullet holes in 1 live round. Okay, final piece of the puzzle comes together. The fact that Kennedy and Connolly were hit by separate bullets, and thus by the Warren Commission's own definition there was a conspiracy, was even confirmed by J. Edgar Hoover himself in a taped telephone conversation with Lyndon Johnson on November 29, 1963. and recently released by the National Archives. Hoover told Johnson that there were 3 shots, that the first shot hit Kennedy, the second shot hit Connally, and the third shot hit Kennedy. What follows is a verbatim transcript of their conversation. Johnson: How many shots were fired? Hoover: 3. Johnson: Any of them fired at me? Hoover: No. All 3 at the president, and we have them. 2 of the shots fired at the president were splintered, but they had characteristics on them so that our ballistics expert were able to prove that they were fired by this gun here. The third shot, which hit the president, he was hit by the first and the third. The second shot hit the governor. The third shot is a complete bullet, and that rolled out of the president's head. I guess rolled. It tore a large part of the president's head off. And in trying to massage his heart at the hospital, on the way to the hospital, they apparently knocked that they apparently loosened that, and it fell on the stretcher. And we recovered that, and we have that, and we have the gun here also. So, this is indisputable proof that on November the 29th, 1963, J. Edgar Hoover and Lyndon Johnson knew that Connally and Kennedy were hit by separate bullets. And then we have here a crime scene search section from the Identification Bureau of 11/27/63, Officer Lieutenant Day, Studebaker, and Captain Fritz. From the CSS of the Identification Bureau, the following: from the 6th floor Texas School Book Depository, 1 6.5 millimeter live action. I'm sorry. It says lever action rifle. Number C2766, and then 2 spent holes from 6th floor window. Elman Houston, nature of offense murder. Signature of person receiving the specimen, Charles T. Brown of the FBI. Vincent Drain was also present. Actually took possession of all evidence, Lieutenant Day. So it's not just the FBI that's making shit up and covering things up. I mean, this is coming from Dallas police documents as well. And then, of course, we have photos, and they're marked A, B, and C. And A appears to be a full bullet, as in a complete live round, not shot. B and C would be your spent fills in this photograph, and you can Google, that. Let's see. Let me go on here. There's a darkened area around it, and of course they were looking at the pictures of the shells. I don't know if it has the commission exhibit. It's either 510 or 519. Can't really read it. But it says there's a darkened area around it, and the cartridge appears to be bent. It looks like a crude hand forgery job. Somehow, both the authentic photo and the forged photo slipped to the commission. The plotters were human. They were caught in their own web. One more important role, or note, in Joseph Ball's questioning of Deputy Sheriff Mooney, he focused on Exhibit 1014. Why did he choose 1014 instead of 1015? Both of which are in the commission report. The answer could be that Joseph Ball knew that Exhibit 1014 was authentic, and he could not understand Exhibit 1015, so he avoided attracting attention to it. This evidence is powerful and persuasive. It shows a pragmatic but botched attempt by the FBI, in concert with the Dallas police, to fabricate evidence to create the illusion that Oswald acted alone after the original plan had gone badly wrong. The Warren Commission was snared in a web of deception. The FBI and the Commission's efforts were a Keystone Cops fiasco, yet it worked. Why? Because the people in charge of the investigation, LBJ and Hoover, made it work. They had the power to tailor and confine the investigation to suit their needs. If the foregoing doesn't convince you, then there is much more evidence to prove that there was more than one gunman. This subject will appear again and again as we progress. It is basic to understand the assassination and cover up are two separate things. The reason is evident. Certain officials in U.S. government considered it absolutely indispensable that evidence of more than one gunman be suppressed, distorted, or destroyed. Otherwise, they would not have been able to contain the investigation. If the foregoing evidence had not been suppressed or distorted, it seems inescapable that outrage would have arisen in the American public and a complete investigation would have been demanded. The citizens of this country would not have been satisfied until a second gunman was found, and as we will discuss coming up, the government officials were compelled to resort to even more extreme measures to cover up the crime, some that were so bizarre and so ghoulish as to defy imagination. And then we'll take a look at the testimony of Luke Mooney. This will be the second session. So he goes through here. Luke Mooney was a deputy sheriff in Dallas County, Texas, and had been so on the force since 1958. They go through a lot of his background and yada, yada, yada. It states where he was. He was standing on Main Street when the president went by. Heard the shots. He came down across the lawn, across Elm Street. He said, I assumed it was approximately the location the president was hit. Of course, the motorcade was gone. There wasn't anything there except a bunch of people, a lot of them lying on the ground, taking on various things. I was running at full speed. He said he ran across Elm, up the embankment, which is a high terrace there across. There's a kind of concrete building there, more or less a little park. He jumped over the fence and went to the railroad yards. And of course, there were other officers over there. Who they were, I don't recall, but Ralph Walters and I were running together. And we jumped into the railroad yards and began to look around there. And of course, we didn't see anything there. Of course, the other officers had checked into the car there and didn't find anything, I don't believe, but a Negro porter. Of course, there were quite a few spectators milling around behind us. We were trying to clear the area out and get all the civilians out that wasn't officers. Ball asked him, well, why'd you go over to the railroad yard? He said, well, that was from the echo of the shots. We thought they came from that direction. That would be north and west from where you're standing. Yes, sir. There wasn't too many seconds, of course. I never did look at my watch to see how many seconds it took us to run so many hundred yards there and into the railroad yard. We were there only a few seconds until we had orders to cover the Texas Depository building. How did you get those orders? Mooney says they were referred to us by the sheriff, Mr. Bill Decker. Where was he when he gave you those orders? Mooney said, well, they were actually relayed on to us. I assumed Mr. Decker was up near the intersection of Elm and Houston. Did you hear it over a loudspeaker? No, sir. It came by word from another officer. And you were with Walters at that time. Right. And where Officer Walters went at that time, I don't know. We split up, and I didn't see any more of him until later on, which I will refer to later. Then where'd you go? He said, Mr. Webster and Mr. Vickery were there with me at the time that we received these orders from another deputy. Plainclothes officers. Mr. Vicker and Mr. Vickery and Mr. Webster, yes, work in the same department. We run over to the building then, which we were only 100 or 200 feet back. But it didn't take us but a few seconds to get there. When we hit the rear part, these big iron gates, they have cyclone fencing on them. This used to be an old grocery store warehouse, Saxon Company, I believe. And I says, let's get these doors closed to block off this rear entrance. Were the doors open? Mooney says they were wide open, big gates. So I grabbed one and we swung them to. And there was a citizen there, and I put him on orders to keep them shut because I don't recall whether there was a lock on them or not. Didn't want to lock them because you never know what might happen. So he stood guard, I assume, until a uniformed officer took over. We shut the back door. There was a back door on the little dock, and then we went through the docks through the rear entrance. Vickery and Webster says we will take the staircase there in the corner. And I said, I will go up the freight elevator. I noticed there was a big elevator there, so I jumped on it. And about that time, two women come running and said, we want to go to the second floor. I said, all right, then get on. We're going. Which elevator did you get on? Mooney said it was the nearest one to the staircase on the northwest corner of the building. There are two elevators there? Mooney said, I found that out later. I didn't know that at the time. And of course, he took the west one. He says it was a push button affair, the best I can remember. I got a hold of the controls and it worked. We started up and got to the second. I was going to let them off and go on up, and when we got there, the power undoubtedly cut off. Because we had no more power on the elevator, I looked around their office there just a short second or two, and then I went up the staircase myself, and I met some other officers coming down. Plainclothes, and I believe they were deputy sheriffs. They were coming down the staircase, but I kept going up. And how come I get off on the sixth floor? I don't know yet. But anyway, I stopped on sixth and didn't even know what floor I was on. You were alone? Yeah, I was alone at that time. Was there any reason for you to go to the sixth floor? Mooney says, no, sir. That's what I say. I don't know why. I just stopped on that particular floor. I thought I was pretty close to the top. Were there any other officers on the floor? Mooney said, I didn't see any at that time. I assumed there had been other officers up there, but I didn't see them. I began crisscrossing it, round and round, through boxes, looking at open windows. Some of them were open over on the south side. And I believe they had started laying some flooring up there. I was checking the fire escapes and crisscrossing back and forth. And then I decided I saw there was another floor. And I said I would go up. So I went up to the seventh floor. I approached Webster and Vickery. They were up there in this little old stairway there that leads up into the attic. So we climbed up in there and looked around right quick. We didn't climb all the way into the attic, almost into it. We said, this is too dark. We got to have floodlights because we can't see. And so somebody made a statement that they believed floodlights were on the way. And I later found out that probably Officers Boone and Walters had gone after lights. I heard that. So we looked down up there for a short time, and then I says, I'm going back down to the sixth. At that time, a news reporter, I didn't know who he was coming up with a camera. Of course, he wasn't taking any pictures. He was just looking too, I assume. So I went back down ahead of Vickery and Webster, and they came in behind me down to the sixth floor. I went straight across to the southeast corner of the building, and I saw all these high boxes. Of course, they were stacked all the way around over there. And I squeezed between two of them, and the minute I squeezed between these two stacks of boxes, I had to turn myself sideways to get in there. And that's when I saw the expended shells, and the boxes that were stacked up looked to be a rest for the weapon. And also, there was a slight crease in the top box. Whether the recoil made the crease or it was placed there before the shots were fired, I don't know. But anyway, there was a very slight crease in the box where the rifle could have lain at the same angle that the shots were fired from. So at that time, I didn't lay my hands on anything because I wanted to save every evidence we could for fingerprints. So I leaned out the window, the same window from which the shots were fired, and I looked down, and I saw Sheriff Bill Decker and Captain Will Fritz standing right on the ground. Well, so I hollered or signaled. I hollered, I think. I whistled a time or two before I got anybody to see me, and yet they was all looking that way too, except the sheriff. He wasn't looking up. And I told him to get the crime lab officers en route, that I had the location spotted. So I stood guard to see that no one disturbed anything until Captain Will Fritz approached with his group of officers, city officers. At that time, of course, when I hollered, Vickery and Webster, they came across, and later on several other deputies. I believe McCurley, I believe he came over where he came from. They was all en route up there, I assume. Ball says, I show you 3 pictures, officer. For your convenience, I will give you the pictures. I have a picture here which has been marked as Commission Exhibit 508. Does that look anything like the southeast corner of the building that you saw that afternoon? Yes, sir. You say you squeezed behind some boxes. Can you point out which boxes you squeezed through? If I remember correctly, I went in there from this angle right here, right through there. There could be a space. There's a space I squeezed in between here, and that is when I got into the opening, because the minute I squeezed through there lay the shells. All right, let's make a mark here. Is this a space? I believe that is going to be the space. Yes, sir. Mooney says, yes, sir. There's another picture I have seen later that shows an opening in through here, but I didn't see that opening at the time. Now I will show you 509. Is that the way the boxes looked? Mooney says, well, that is the 3 boxes, but none of them was tilted off just a little, laying down the edge, I believe, to my knowledge. Now, does that look like? Mooney says, well, that is the 3 boxes that were there. Yes, sir. Are they arranged as they were when you saw them? Mooney said, I'm not positive. As I remember right, there was one box tilted off. Ball says, what were the boxes? Did they have a label on them? 2 of the boxes? These do. I didn't notice the label at the time. Ball said, well, that is a picture of the window? Mooney says, yes. Do I understand that you say it appeared to you that the top box was tilted? Mooney said, well, the end of it was laying this way. You say there was a crease in the box. Where was that crease? The crease was right in this area of this box. You mean over on the edge? Yes, sir, on this far edge here, where I am laying my finger. Did it go into the box? Very slightly, Mooney says. A very slight crease. Now, was there anything you saw over in the corner? No, sir. I didn't see anything over in the corner. I did see this one partially eaten piece of fried chicken laying over to the right a bit. It looked like he was facing, and the Ball interrupts him and says, well, tell us where you found it. And he said, it would be laying over on the top of these other boxes. This here is kind of blurred. Ball says, we will get to that in a moment. And now I show you Commission Exhibit 510, which is the picture we were talking about earlier, folks. Is that the empty shells you found? Mooney said, yes, sir. Ball says, are they shown here? Yes, sir. Now, will you take this and encircle the shells? All right. Put a fairly good sized circle around each shell. That is the way they were when you saw them. Is that right? Mooney says, yes, sir. I assume that this possibly could have been the first shot. Ball says, you cannot speculate about that. Mooney says, no. Ball says, those were empty shells? Yes, sir. And they were turned over to Captain Fritz? Yes, sir. He was the first officer that picked them up, as far as I know, because I stood there and watched him go over and pick them up and look at them. As far as I could tell, I couldn't even tell what caliber they were, because I didn't get down that close to them. They were brass cartridges, brass shells. Ball says, the disposition of the cartridges is shown on 510 as you saw them. Mooney says, yes, sir. That is just about the way they were laying, to the best of my knowledge. I do know there was one further away, and those other two were relatively close together in this particular area. With these cartridges, this one and this one looks like they were further apart than they actually was. Which ones? Mooney said, this one and this one. Now, two cartridges were close together, is that right? The one cartridge here by the wall facing is right. And this one, they were further away from this one. Ball says, well, Mooney said, but as to being positive of the exact distance, Ball says, you think the cartridges are in the same position as when you saw them in this picture. Mooney says, as far as my knowledge, they are pretty close to right. So Ball's trying to pin him down, and Mooney's like, it looks close to right, but not the way I remember them. Now, Ball says, I didn't quite understand. Did you say it was your memory that A and B were not that close together? Mooney says, just from my memory, it seems that this cartridge ought to have been over this way a little further. You mean the B cartridge should be closer to C? And he says, yes, sir, closer to the C. Now, I have another picture here, which I would like to have marked as 511. Ball says, does this appear to be, first of all, does that appear? Mooney says, there are two cartridges. Where's the third one? Mr. Ball says, the third one is not in this picture. This is taken from another angle. Mooney says, well, this looks more like it than this angle here. You can see it as a different angle. Ball says. Mooney says, well, yeah, that's right. Now, in the same picture, 511, you see a box in the window. Does that seem to be about the right angle? So they get away from the shells for a second and go back to this box. Now, what if you look up Commission Exhibit 510, you will see, folks, that shell C is ejected quite a distance away from the rifle, or where the alleged shots were being fired from. And shell B is almost directly right under the window. It doesn't appear that it was ejected very far. And Mooney seems to remember that when he saw them, that the two ejected shells were much closer together than they were in this picture. So they keep discussing other angles of this picture. And then something a little more interesting. They start talking about the chicken bone. Ball says, does that show any place where you saw the chicken bone? Mooney said, well, if I recall correctly, the chicken bone could have been lying on this box, or it might have been lying on this box right here. Ball says, make two X's. You think there was a chicken bone on the top of either one of these two? Mooney said, there was one of them partially eaten, and there was a little small paper poke. And Ball says, well, by poke, you mean a paper sack? And Mooney says, yes. Ball said, where was that? Mooney says, saw the chicken bone was lying here. The poke was laying about a foot away from it. On the same carton? Mooney said, yes, sir, in close relation to each other. But as to what was in the sack, it was knotted together, and I didn't open it. I didn't put my hands on it to open it. I only saw one piece of chicken. And then Senator Cooper interjects into this questioning for the first time. And he says, well, tell me, boy, how far was the piece of chicken you saw in the paper bag from the boxes near the window, and particularly the box that had the crease on it? Mooney says, I would say they might have been 5 feet away. 5 feet, folks. 5 feet. Bonnie Ray Williams. Now, see, at the time all this shit was going on, they thought that Oswald had been sitting up there in this corner, waiting, eating a chicken sandwich, drinking a Dr. Pepper, all that good stuff. Turns out the whole chicken bone Dr. Pepper thing was Bonnie Ray Williams, 5 feet away from the sniper's nest. Now, tell me, either Bonnie Ray Williams was blind as a fucking bat and never saw anybody, Oswald or anybody, 5 feet away from him as he sat there and ate his chicken sandwich, drank his Dr. Pepper, and smoked a cigarette. You know, that activity would probably take about 10 or 15 minutes. At least 10, 5 to 10. You know, if you were, you're eating your chicken, drinking your soda pop, smoke a couple cigarettes, and you're sitting there. Nobody else is on the floor. There's no other noise. So either Oswald is sitting there behind a box, not breathing, not moving, on this old rickety ass building, floors creak, I'm sure. Bonnie Ray Williams doesn't hear anything or see anything or anybody. That means to me that there wasn't nobody there to be seen or heard. Or Bonnie Ray Williams is lying about sitting up there alone. And he was actually up there with Oswald. Oswald might have told him to get lost as the time came closer to the presidential motorcade. And then he went down on the 5th floor with his buddies to watch the motorcade. And he didn't want to associate himself whatsoever with that period of time because as a black man in the South in 1963 and the president's getting killed, you don't want any part of being 5 feet away from an alleged assassin, folks. That was a bold move because if they could have proved that Bonnie Ray would have been up there with Oswald, which they could have made a pretty decent case of doing, being the only people covering for Bonnie Ray Williams were the other two African American gentlemen on the 5th floor and what time he was there and what he told them. Because there's always been something slightly off about this whole situation. About, the 5th floor guys and what they said and their movements and Doherty and what they said in DC and all this stuff. So I'm just saying that one way or the other, there is some fuckery afoot. And the rest of this interview with Luke Mooney is concerned with finding the rifle, and then they go back to the position of the boxes and the boxes and the boxes and totally gloss over the whole shell game again. And then we have 403A, which is an evidence sheet from the Dallas Police Department, an evidence inventory sheet. And they say one Italian made 6.5 millimeter rifle, serial number C2766, blue steel, wood stock, brown leather sling with a 4x18 coated ordnance optics, Hollywood, California, 010 power, Japan telescopic sight, found by Deputy Sheriff Weitzman on the 6th floor, 5 feet from the west wall and 8 feet from the stairway. One green and brown blanket found by who is that? Found by somebody, Rose Stovall and Adamczyk at 2515 West Fifth Irving, Texas, taken from garage. 138 slug taken from the body of J.D. Tippett at Methodist Hospital by Dr. Paul Molinoff at 1:30 p.m. He gave them to R.A. Davenport. 1 homemade paper top something gun case found by Johnson and Montgomery at 411 Elm and brought to crime lab. 138 pistol, 2-inch barrel. McDonald took it from Oswald at 231 West Jefferson and gave it to Sergeant Jerry Hill, who gave it to Detective Baker. Bullet fragments taken from body of Governor Connolly. Mrs. Audrey Bell, operating room nurse, to Bob Nolan, DPS, to Captain Fritz, to the crime lab, to the FBI. 1 live round, 6.5 millimeter. 2 6.5 millimeter spent rounds, recovered by Deputy Sheriff Luke Mooney at 411 Elm, 6th floor, southeast window. So there you have it, folks. There you have it. On multiple official documents from the DPD, from the FBI, in pictures, 2 shells, 1 live round. 2 girls, 1 cup. No, I'm joking. 2 live rounds, or 1 live round, 2 spent shells. So, when did this change? Of course, this changed. I mean, at the time, they were just collecting evidence, whatever evidence was there. They said what they saw. The evidence didn't change until the narrative had to change. That this one lone gunman fired 3 shots. Well, it's kind of hard to say that he fired 3 shots if you only find 2 spent shells. What's your argument going to be? Well, maybe he picked one up and took it with him. Maybe it flew out the window and you didn't find it below. I don't know. But at some point, it turned from 2 spent shells and 1 live round on the floor to 3 spent shells and 1 live round in the chamber. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. And that's not all with the shells. You know, there's there's a bunch of stuff going on with these shells. One of them, they were trying to figure out if they were reloads. They were trying to figure out where they came from, who was selling this ammunition, where could Oswald got these bullets. You know, and I believe that at least one of these empty holes were dented so badly that it probably couldn't have been fired. Who knows? But this leads us down the road of, Kyle Ryder and the Irving Sports Shop and all this jazz. The guy that probably put the scope on where Oswald probably got his ammunition, if it was his, who knows. Um, I do know that there's a story out there. So here we go with some interesting kind of stuff just to wrap everything up. Um, Gerald Patrick Hemming has been a darling of several different researchers over the years, including Greg Burnham, Noel Twyman, A.J. Weberman, and he's told a lot of different stories to a lot of different people. But as with anyone knows, there's always maybe a kernel of corn truth in a big pile of dog shit. And with Gerald Hemming, it's no different. Um, Now, I want to read you a little interaction between Garland Slack and Wesley Liebler of the Warren Commission. And we've been talking about the past couple of shows about this Johnson 30-06 motorized rifle, right? So check this out. Liebler says, in other words, this rifle that Oswald had was a sporterized rifle. It had been rebuilt. Slack says, just as advertised. I have seen besides the Oswald, I have friends that have those rifles. I wouldn't shoot a toad frog with one of them because I know they're just junk, right? So then Liebler asks him after some things, was there anybody else with Oswald? Slack says, that Sunday there sure was. The tall boy had the biggest feet of any kid I ever saw. And about the time he would go to shoot, he would kick with his feet. And I said, if my feet were that damn big, I would bump somebody too. He was the boy that drove him to the rifle range on November 17th, 1963. They found the boy. He had no connection with him except that he had driven him there. And Liebler says, how do you know they found him? Slack says, I read it in the paper. I don't know what his name was. Don't know where they found him. But they found him, and he had no connection with him. No more than I had. He just probably begged to ride, and they took him to the rifle range, and they had 3 guns. Lucille remembers the boy handing the guns over the fence, and they were throwing the guns in the back of an old model car and taking off like they did. So, like I said before, Hemming has told a lot of things to a lot of researchers, including A.J. Weberman. Now, something interesting that he did tell Weberman about the shells. Okay. I'm trying to scroll back here and find it where it starts. Bear with me, please. We're almost there, I promise. So, A.J. Weberman put forth this theory of Hemming and Oswald at the Sportsdrome rifle range in November of 63. It says, Oswald was driven to the Sportsdrome rifle range several occasions by Hemming, including Sunday, November 17th, 1963, as part of the setup. A credible assassin had to have practiced, and Hemming knew that Oswald's presence at the rifle range would be detected and reported on after the assassination by the good old boys in adjoining booths. Hemming also had to obtain spent shells from Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano the plant in the Texas School Book Depository on November 22nd, 1963. Hemming fired Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano, and Oswald fired Hemming's, quote, sporterized rifle. Hemming put the spent shells from Oswald's rifle in his pocket, and Oswald put the spent shells from Hemming's weapon in his pocket. Hemming said he liked Oswald's gun and offered him double what it was worth. He told him to bring it to the School Book Depository on November 22nd. By that time, Hemming would have the money to purchase the weapon from Oswald because everyone in Interpen, including Oswald, was going to come into some money. After the assassination, several men who were at the range that day told the FBI that they had seen Oswald there. However, after the assassination, the FBI determined to portray Oswald as the lone assassin. It would not be accused of having overlooked a broader conspiracy, suppressed all indications that Oswald had a questionable associate, such as the, quote, tall man who accompanied him to the Sportsdrome rifle range. So was Jerry Patrick Hemming the tall man? Because he was a tall man in real life, 6'7". Probably had some big ass feet, no doubt. And this tall person would definitely have stood out in people's minds and not be a forgotten character. Now, the one thing that Hemming has admitted to in various places is offering to buy the Mannlicher Carcano from Lee Oswald, telling him to bring it to work that day, and that Hemming would be to buy it from him. Now, whether or not this is true, I have no idea. I'm just saying. And he made the comment as well when he was working on Oliver Stone's movie JFK. If you will look very closely at the shooters in the 6th floor depository, you'll see Gerald Patrick Hemming, real life Gerald Patrick Hemming, portraying one of the shooters on the 6th floor. And he told A.J. Weberman that he acquired some shells from Oswald's rifle and planted them in the book depository to frame Oswald as the patsy. But take that for what you will, folks. Who the hell knows? When it comes to Hemming, take everything with a grain of salt. But could it be that this is why all this nonsense and fuckery and things that don't make sense about the shells, about Bonnie Ray Williams, about how the shells got on the 6th floor? Could this be the reason, the story? Choose for yourself, folks. Once again, on Twitter at the Lone Gunman 7, on TikTok at the Lone Gunman 7, and YouTube, the Lone Gunman Podcast channel. Check it out. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate you all. Have a great day. And don't forget, Bob loves you. Peace.
Burn down every bridge if your body lies away. Now your hands are gone and no one left to die.